On that revised roadmap by the Electoral Commission that was announced today, 2020 to 2021, the general elections will be taking a different look now. And joining us to take a look at that is Crispin Kaheru, who is an election expert within the country. And we have Charity Ahimbisiwe, who is the national coordinator at CEDO. Welcome to NTV Tonight.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll start off with what your comments are, because when you look at this revised roadmap, there are two particular groups here that if you're on the other side, either you're an aspirant or you're a voter. So we start off with a voter. What do you think of it? And we'll start off with your Charity. What is your comment for a voter who is going to be taking part in these elections?
Now, the voter that is taking part in these elections is going to find it a bit strange because the elections are not the usual ones that they are used to. There are elections that are having campaigns being conducted online. And then we also have some consultative processes which are not necessarily offline. And the people in the countryside, the villagers, will suffer the most because some of them do not have electricity, some cannot access radio stations. If you go to Buvuma Island, it's the one that I like using most because in 2016 we did go to Buvuma. They hardly have a mast to even transmit information via a phone. If you go to Kalangala, it is a similar situation. And if they need to access information on a phone or on a radio, they have to take a boat to the mainland. Now that is your ordinary voter. In the countryside, Amuru, Apa, Kanungu down there, people struggle with network, with connection. Even Kampala here, just go on a Zoom meeting and see how much you're going to struggle to get onto Zoom. Now if we have technological challenges, and the 2016 petition that ended in court asked that there be a law in technology, and that law in technology should provide for the use of technology during elections, and it's not present, then this election is going to be the unusual election for the ordinary voter. There needs to be a compromise to get as many Ugandans involved in the process. Dialogue should ensue right now, and louder voice of mobilization and sensitizing the voter should happen right now.
Okay, and what about you, Crispin? Do you share the same thoughts with Charity on this?
Well, I want to say that this particular phase of the electoral process starts off from a very complicated place because the key players, who are the political parties, the candidates, the aspirants, they can't move, they can't hold assemblies. And as we very well know, elections are about two key elements: assembly and mobility. So when those are taken out of the electoral process, then there is something different about that electoral process. And I think, like Charity says, rightly observes, if you look at the Ugandan electorate, most of the people that are very enthusiastic about taking part in elections are actually in the countryside. They're in the rural areas. Do you have the infrastructure to reach those people, or for those people to feel involved in the electoral process? Do you have internet connection? Do you have radio stations, television stations? If you're going to take these campaigns online and on radio, do you have that infrastructure? I think that is, for me, the question that the Electoral Commission has to share about with the stakeholders, and also the whole question of the legality of the guidelines that the Electoral Commission has issued and will subsequently issue to guide the different electoral activities.
Let's get into those legalities.
Yes. I think for me the question begs on whether those guidelines can actually stand a test if they are not marinated in the legal framework. Because we are seeing so many changes with regard to how people are going to campaign, changes with regard to how people are going to be voting, how people are going to be organized at a polling station, how the polling station itself will be organized in light of social distancing measures. So all these taken into account, are they provided for within the existing law? I think for me, there must be the fastest move to ensure that all guidelines that are pronounced by the Electoral Commission lie within a certain framework. Like Charity has rightly observed, we are still grappling with the whole question of what is the definite legal framework within which this election is going to be conducted. Why? Because the bills that were passed by Parliament sometime early this year in March, I don't think they have actually been assented to by the President. So that still creates some sort of uncertainty to this whole election process.
Now, if you have that uncertainty looming, who do we put pressure on? Because at this point in time, as we say, this is what we want, this is what we are asking for, we have been asking, and then the EC comes out with this. Who do we now start to look at and say we need this in place at this point in time? And we say to ensure that we have a leveled ground when it comes to the electoral process. Charity.
I think one of the things that should happen now is stakeholder engagement. And the first set of people to engage is the voter themselves. Article 59 does give them the mandate to vote. And that right cannot be tampered with by anybody. Now, apart from Article 59, the Constitution in Article 1 says all power belongs to the people. So the Ugandan, the ordinary Ugandan, has the right to decide his political destiny at this point. So the pressure should be built by the Ugandan on the institution. The institution that changes laws is Parliament. And I think Electoral Commission was put on spot today to explain how they're going to do these things based on which law. And they said they do not change laws, they operate within the existing law. So the Parliament needs to move fast to look at the situation as is, but they listen in from the public. Because amending the Constitution per se, in my view, may not be the solution to COVID-19.
Okay, and you, Crispin, your thoughts on that as well?
Well, I think it's important to hear what the stakeholders say, not just on the revised roadmap, but also on the changes that the Electoral Commission is integrating in the electoral process. I think it's going to take a lot of pulse checking to arrive at a position that is agreeable. As we see right now, I am not certain that different stakeholders have actually been consulted on this roadmap prior to its release, like we saw with the original roadmap. I don't think that stakeholders have also been consulted on the changes that have been motivated by, of course, the COVID pandemic. And for me, the first point of call is for the Electoral Commission to engage all the different stakeholders, civil society, political parties, the security agencies that play an important role in the country's election, the voters, to hear what they say. There has been this lingering question around whether to postpone the election or go ahead with the election within the circumstances. I have not seen that leadership coming out from the Electoral Commission to invite stakeholders to discuss that question. And I think it is important, if indeed the government is to secure buy-in for this electoral process, to hear what people are saying and go with the consensus of the people, not of what it thinks is right.
Okay. Now, as we've wrapped this up, I just want both of you to describe to me what our electoral process will be. From what we're seeing at this point in time, what kind of election are we going to have as a country?
For me, we called it scientific at CEDU. And the reason why we think it is scientific is because it's not the ordinary election that we've had. It is an election that considers the health of Ugandans first, and then the poll next. We are not saying it is scientific to cut off people from participating. It's critical that every Ugandan is involved in the process. But we also want people to be alive as they go to the polls. So it's a different election that will have temperature guns, it will have sanitizers, it will have masks to it, it will have social distancing to it, it will have no hugging, no getting in crowds, 5,000 people at a polling station. We have won my candidate, but the law provides for 5 people to be available at the polling station before the polls start. And I think that can also be achieved, and the chairperson of the Electoral Commission said the polling itself would not be affected. They would accommodate a lot of the SOPs in the process of polling. What is changing most, and which should bother the political actors, is the question of radio and TV and the cost that comes with running a campaign on TV and radio. It is a very difficult process, which we must reconsider and see. And also the law does not provide for execution of radios or TVs that do not provide equal airplay for people across the political platform. So if I am NTV and I have inclination to NRM, I will not allow FDC, and then nobody can prosecute me because the choice is mine on who comes to my radio or TV station.
Crispin, do you agree with her?
Well, I think it's an election that is going to partly favor the literate community in Uganda. The community that can access internet, the community that can access radio, TV, the community that walks around with handheld devices, smartphones. I think that's it's an opportunity for that community of Ugandans to get more involved in this election. But at the same time, I think it's going to disadvantage those that don't have access to these things. It could be an opportunity for the country to ramp up infrastructure in the countryside to ensure that our internet penetration gets to 100%, to ensure that each Ugandan can access radio, TV, to ensure all those other, supporting infrastructures are availed to the voter. But I think the other important thing that we also need to put emphasis on is that I think this election could leave out the very vulnerable people. The people that may not necessarily be caught within the formal setting of either communication, of interaction. We might see challenges for people to actually obtain feedback from the candidates, share their questions with candidates. How will they do it? Over phone, over text? If they listen to your manifesto, how do they give you feedback? How do you get back to them on the issues? So I think it's going to be, well, it's an election that has challenges, but we could also leverage those challenges to create opportunities.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on NTV Tonight this evening. I was joined by Crispin Kaheru, an election expert, and Charity Ahimbisiwe, a national coordinator with SEDU. Thank you very much. Now,